Welcome to Worth Wandering with Sarah and Brody. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brody.
And welcome to Worth
Wandering.
Nerd.
You
We're going to
nerd.
get it exactly one day.
You're obsessed.
So before we dive into today's topic, Brody, do you want to do a quick little check-in? How was your week?
My week was good, actually.
Good.
It was really productive, especially for the podcast things. Really getting like the marketing down and figuring out what kind of colors to use for Instagram and that kind of stuff.
Oh my God, yes.
You know what I mean? So trying to narrow down our framework and our presentation and that kind of stuff. The audience will probably know this already, but we're both still very new to podcasting and we're still learning. And the podcasting part is the easiest part. It's the marketing and the branding and getting it out there and getting people to actually exchange with you. Like if you put up a poll, how to get your audience to engage with that poll. You might have 200 people that look at it, but maybe one or two people actually engage with it. So I've been doing a lot of research on that. So it's been really productive for the podcast. The YouTube is good. YouTube, the big thing is really sharing my journey in the sense of how to challenge myself to be a better version of myself. And one of the things I'm really set on is, I know, right, is all the marathons. So our rogue relay for work got canceled, which is the 230-mile relay with 12 people.
Oh my God.
And we are excited because it got canceled last year because of COVID, and they just canceled it again this past week. And I was like, you know what, I'm over this. So what I'm going to do is I said, what do I do best?
Run myself.
The thing I do best is just when something doesn't work, I fix it. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to create my own marathon.
No way.
And so I'm just going to create my own, create a route and put a thing out there for whoever wants to join in. And if I get myself or if I get 20 people that want to challenge themselves to push themselves a little bit and break out of their barriers and their boundaries, then feel free to join me.
You're amazing.
How about you?
My week could not have been more different. No, actually, I've broken down some barriers in terms of learning how to deal with my mental illness. I'm doing cognitive behavioral therapy. We might do this as an episode one day because I think it's super interesting and a lot of people do it, but it really helps with OCD, especially when you have ego-dystonic intrusive thoughts, which are thoughts that are completely the opposite of how you feel you are as a person, which is so funny. I'm talking about this because today we're talking about identity. But
right. I was going to say that kind of goes hand in hand with identity.
It totally does. And so I've learned how to not just cope, but actually learning how to stop my intrusive thoughts. And it's really hard, but I'm doing it and it's working well. But today was good. I mean, do you want to get real with what today was like? I'm not wearing pants. Sorry, everybody. I am not wearing pants.
You just can't do it, huh?
No.
Some days you just can't wear pants. Pants are overrated. They're constricting.
It's less about not caring about pants and more about we haven't done laundry in like 4 weeks and I'm out of pants. Even sleep.
So it's nothing to do with your emotional state well-being. It's just you have no pants to wear.
Only in the way that I've not been able to get myself to do laundry in 4 weeks. Other than that, it's fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. But my son's birthday is this week on Friday. He's turning 2 years old. Little Ollie Roo. Choo choo. He's turning 2.
You brought a new roast of coffee that we're experimenting with and a cookie for his birthday. So thank you so much. Sorry I was at work.
No, that's okay. So let's segue right into what today's topic is. So if you are joining us for the first time, I am a communication studies professor working in several colleges around Los Angeles County, and that entails a lot of different things. But what we're focusing on today is what I would teach traditionally in an interpersonal communication class, and it's about identity, because all that we focused on this whole season so far are all of these awesome people and how they see themselves and how they see the world. And so I think
how do I get there? Right?
What do you mean?
I think that's a question of that people might have, right?
Yeah.
We're sharing these stories so far. We've shared stories of 4 different people.
Yeah.
And a question that a listener might have is, but how do I get there?
Yeah. Like how do
I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want.
Right. Exactly. And if you're like me and you have identity crises often with big
Mm-hmm.
change, or when we're in a pandemic that the world hasn't seen for over, I don't even know, 100 years. And a lot of people are suffering right now. So if you're anywhere where I am with depression, anxiety, OCD, and you're kind of wondering like, who the fuck am I?
Mm-hmm.
This may help. I don't know. We'll find out. I mean,
Well, and
shit.
let's also tell listeners too is that you don't have to have a state of depression or anxiety or a lower emotional
Yeah.
well-being.
Mm-hmm.
You could feel like you're on
Yeah.
top of the world, but you could be in a
Wondering
crisis
who
of,
you
I
are.
don't know what I want to do with my life anymore. I'm sick of my
Yeah.
job, or I just want to try something different.
Yeah.
Right? I
So I
mean,
think
like,
having a foundation of what is our identity in the first place is kind of something that we're not taught. We
oh,
inherently
for
learn
sure.
it. So we know about it. So everything we talk about today, you're going to be like, oh my God, yes, I do that. Or I know I live that. But now you're just going to have terms for it. That's really all comp studies is things that you already know, but now we're giving you names for it and a view from outside yourself so that you can actually change things if you want to.
Now, is there a set of tools that we're going to be able to give the listeners today that they can essentially take home with them? Or
Yes, yes,
I think we should put something in writing that people can download and take
for
home.
sure. Oh yeah, we could do that.
So why don't we jump right into it then? Because I'm
Okay,
sure
let's do
people
it.
are going to be excited to hear this one.
Well, so my intro question is
Yeah.
if there is one thing about yourself, your identity, what would it be that you would like to change?
Ooh, that I would like to change. I think what was interesting was that in the middle of that question, I was ready to answer the opposite of that.
Oh, that's
More,
interesting.
I like that. So what would I want to change?
Mhm.
Damn. I would have to say, I don't know, honestly. I think that's probably a common answer.
I think it is too. And some people will be like, oh, I have so many things I want to change, like this, and this. I mean, for me, it's not something that I want to change because I hate it about myself, but it's something that I'd like to improve. And so I'd like to be more confident in myself
Ooh.
as a teacher, in myself as a mother, in myself as a wife, in myself as just a woman.
So I don't want to steal yours,
You
but
can.
that actually is perfect because this is the whole reason why I wanted to build a YouTube channel on top of this. A big reason, not to just share
Yeah.
my journey and to inspire people, but to also build my confidence as well. Because I, even though I'm super outgoing, I
Yeah.
have a huge lack of confidence when it comes to putting myself out there.
You
And
wouldn't know it because you're so good at just faking it till you make it.
100%. And
Mm.
I still have not, 3 episodes have been put up to YouTube, and I have not posted that I started a YouTube channel on my social media accounts.
You are hilarious.
Isn't
Meanwhile,
that great?
he's putting something every day about worth wandering.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah,
Okay.
honestly, I would
So
probably would want to improve my self-confidence.
okay. And so for listeners, you may have already answered this question, but I want you to keep it in mind as we talk about what we talk about today. And maybe that answer will change by the end of this conversation. Who knows? Okay. So
I like it.
this is like my favorite shit to teach. I love teaching interpersonal communication because it's all about relationships with other people and yourself. And I
So is
think
that
we
what interpersonal
overlook,
communication is just
yeah. So
the comms between you and other people.
yeah, interpersonal is between you and other people. We also have one called intrapersonal, which is between you and yourself. But that is partially what we talk about when we're doing interpersonal communication as well.
That's
So
smart.
before we go into the identity part, I want to quickly talk about why we communicate as humans in the first place. Like, if I were to
Mhm.
ask you, why do you think humans communicate? What's the need? What would you say?
I think there's a general need for people in the sense of like a connection.
It's so social.
Yeah, correct.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's one of them. You nailed it, Brody. 1 out of 4.
Now, are we talking about how you identify a self-identity?
No, not yet. This is just
Oh,
why do we
okay.
communicate as
Just
humans?
why we
Because
communicate.
I feel like it's important to know this because of
S-
one of these 4 needs, or two of these 4 needs, are what we're going to talk about today.
I think there's a physical and a social like
Yep. That's
that
one,
you would need.
physical, and one is social. So you got two,
Hmm.
physical
I
and
know. What are the other
social,
two?
identity and practical. And so what those mean for people who are like, okay, that's great. What? So physical is brain, psychological, and body, physiological. So we need our minds to be stimulated, and we do that through communication,
Right.
right? We also need physical touch. And
Mm-hmm.
so for the brain part of it, we can understand why we might need communication. A lot of people during this pandemic, especially those who have had to go through the pandemic and quarantine completely alone, might realize that their mental health has significantly decreased. So
Mm-hmm.
that right there shows you how much we need psychological stimulation from other people and being able to communicate. Now, the touch is really interesting. So, this does vary. All humans need this, but some people need it to a different extent. So, if you are somebody who doesn't like touch, you need less of this. But if you're somebody like me who's very high contact and needs hugs all the time to feel secure, you need this all the time. And without it, we're not okay as humans. So let me throw you a 1944 case study. This was in 1944, before we really did things ethically. So I think this was a horribly unethical study. But they had a control group of
Mm-hmm.
20 newborn babies, okay, that were born at a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had the nurture group of another 20 babies. So we're looking at 40 babies. One is the control, one is the nurture group.
Sure.
And the control group, what they did with those 20 babies when they were born is they only met their physiological needs. So they changed their diapers, they bathed them, they fed them, but they did not give them eye contact or affectionate touch or even any verbal communication. So no words, no reassurance, no affectionate touch like rubbing them or holding them or patting them or swaying them. And they didn't look at them in the eyes. Now, since then, this study has also proven that if a parent is on their phone and the baby's looking at them, trying to get their attention, they are suffering psychological damage. The nurture group, however, got both physiological and psychological and emotional needs met. The babies were given affection in terms of touch, eye contact, and verbal communication. So the opposite.
Okay.
The outcome is wild. So the 20 babies that had no eye contact, barely any touch, after 4 months, half of the 20 babies died, even though there was nothing physically wrong with them. That's half the babies died without anything actually
So
being wrong with them physically.
out of those 20, 10 died.
So 50% of babies who were born healthy died after 4 months of this treatment, which was basic needs met. Before they died, they noticed that the babies would stop verbalizing, they would stop moving, and they would actually stop crying or changing facial expressions. Isn't that wild? In the nurture group, all the babies lived and thrived. So this was super unethical. You can see why, because they let basically 10 babies die. But it really shows how important touch is and verbal and nonverbal communication to us as humans.
Yeah.
So verbal is us talking to each other. Nonverbal are the things that we do, like, head nods or touch with our hands or turning our bodies away when we're in conversation, which is to say, hey, I don't really want to talk to you. So that's the first one. The second one is identity. And that's just we learn who we are through other people. There is compelling evidence to prove that how we identify ourselves are what other people have told us. And we're going to get into that in a second. Okay. The next one are relationships, right? We want to feel wanted, loved, understood. We want to be able to do that for others as well. And our brains need that constant stimulation from other people. We're naturally social creatures. We want to be around other people. Have you ever seen Mindfield, Brody? Okay. If anybody watches Mindfield with Michael, he talks about isolation and he does a whole study where he goes into an isolation booth that was just white padded walls, basic needs. So food, not fancy food, like, astronaut food, water, and a bed. Nothing else. And he started to actually hallucinate and see things. He would have fits of rage. He felt like he didn't know who he was anymore. So he actually started to lose his identity because he was isolated from other people.
Interesting.
Okay, you need to act more interested.
No, well, that is my interesting face. No, it is interesting though, because it only makes sense that if you take everything away from, well, I mean, think about it in terms of prison. If you put them in the hole, right, when they do something wrong,
it's used as punishment.
Right. I mean, look at what's the movie? The guy who gets lost on an island and then he has the volleyball Wilson. Wilson.
Castaway.
I don't remember. Castaway. There we go. It's the same concept though.
For sure. And there's a lot of movies that we like to do about this. But here's a crazy thing. What happens if someone is never exposed to social interaction in the first place?
Is like they're an age frame that we're talking about here?
I'm talking about from the moment they're born. I mean,
Okay.
what we've been talking about so far is all these people who are older and then they, for some reason, they get isolated and then they start to go crazy.
So
What
you're
if
talking
they
about like
never?
baby is born, you take them
Yes.
from the womb into the
Mhm.
world, but then put them into isolation.
Mhm. Now, there's an actual story about this. There's a kid named Feral Child, which I think is such a horrible term for them. They also called her Wild Child. Again, not great.
Sorry, that's a terrible name.
But it's a human child who has lived. I mean, this is what they call any kid who has done this, feral child or wild child. But it's a human child
I
who's
see.
lived isolated from human contact from a very young age, where they have little or no experience of human care, behavior, or language. And one person in particular was named Jeannie. So she was a 13-year-old girl who was strapped into a straitjacket and tied to a chair in a silent room by her father since she was a toddler.
Now, is this an actual
This
event?
is an actual event. He had forbidden her to
Okay.
cry, forbidden her to speak or make any noise, and had beaten and growled at her like a dog. She couldn't talk. She was incontinent, meaning she was not potty trained, salivated, and spat. She could barely chew or swallow and had not fully focused her eyes or realized how to extend her limbs. And she weighed 59 pounds and she was 13 years old when they found her. Isn't that the most
Wow.
horrific shit you've ever heard? So she didn't understand language. She acted like an animal, because that is how we know who we are as people, is by learning how to be a person from those around us.
Right. You imitate your surroundings. And so
Exactly.
her surrounding was growling, no nonverbal, anything like
Mhm.
that. Your only verbal social cue is to growl.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's
And
you'll
he
so
got on
she's
his
gonna
own.
imitate.
Yeah. It's such a wild thing to think about. And then the last one is really simple. The last need of communication is practical, meaning to get stuff done. If I asked you to hand me a pen, it's really easy for you to be able to understand me and hand me a pen. But if I said, hand me a
Right.
pen without speaking and without using nonverbal communication, you can't do it, because literally everything we do is communicating something. Like,
Well, your
Brody,
first initial response is, "Here you go." That's an answer to, hand me a pen. Here you go.
right? But that's communicating.
Right.
So if I were to try and ask you for a pen without communicating, even if I signed my hand in the air, scribbling it like a pen on a paper, that is me communicating non-verbally that I want something. So there's no way we cannot not communicate. Everything you do communicates something to somebody else. What you're wearing,
Mm-hmm.
if you're wearing makeup, how you choose to style your hair, the backpack you choose to go to school, the shoes that you have on your feet. And some people may argue, I don't care what I'm wearing today. And I'll say, okay, that's communicating something about you, isn't it? That you don't
How
care
so?
about what people think of you,
I
or
see what you're
you don't
saying.
care how you look that particular day because today fashion was not the first thing on your mind, right? So even when we're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I just grabbed the cleanest thing closest to me in my room, that would still be you communicating that, one, I need to do laundry, or two, I just don't care really how I look today, right? So those are the reasons that we communicate as human beings. And I just thought it was interesting to talk about it because it's so important to know. But let's go
Right.
to identity. Identity. Who are
I love
you?
it.
Who are you, Brody?
Ooh, don't ask me
So
that
if I were to
question.
ask you, who are you? Like, what, no limits, what are the things that you would say? What's your dating profile?
So that's funny because when I think of self-identity, so if you were to open Instagram right now, what does your bio say?
That was going to be one of my
Right?
tests for you later on, and a test for the audience. So keep that in your back pocket because it's going to be good.
Okay. So
But seriously, what if I
y-
asked you, like, who are you? First date talk. Who are you? What should I know about you? What are those like kind of elevator pitch you have for
I'm gonna
yourself?
define myself as what I do for a living. I'm gonna tell you I was born and raised in Santa Monica. I work as an ER tech. I like, long walks on the beach, mountain biking, blah 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 blah. I podcast, you know.
Yeah.
We're a business owner, but yeah, that's exactly how I identify myself.
Right. If you break it down and you start looking at how we identify ourselves, there's a whole range of things that we could talk about. We could talk about the roles that we take, right? So I might say I'm a mother and a teacher. Those are
Mm.
roles that I have. Then I
Mm-hmm.
could say stuff like I love art and I love photography. And those are hobbies. So I can describe myself in terms of the things that I like or dislike. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're looking at personal identity, there's so much, but I'm going to try to break it down in a way that makes sense.
Well, I
So,
think that there's correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like people identify themselves as not necessarily how they should, but how they
right,
do is like their career, their social
right,
status, and their beliefs,
for sure. Oh, yeah. And also their cultural
right?
norms and values, our fantasies are part of our identity, our age, our gender, our sexual orientation, our race, all of those things are part of our identity. So there's so many components. And when we're looking at what are these components of the self, there's a few. So the first one is self concept. And these are just the relatively stable perceptions that you hold of yourself. So, the way that you view yourself that are pretty stable across time, they're built on three identities: your cultural identity, your social identity, and your personal identity. And all that really means is in terms of cultural identity, this is your own sense of belonging to a particular culture. Do you know what culture is, by the way? It's like
Define it
such a
because
hard thing to define.
it is. So like, and I'll put this out there just as a vulnerability thing. So
Yeah.
people either might feel they define it the same way or not. If I think of culture, I immediately go to a sense like a demographic almost. And I
So like
think like
like ethnicity?
demographic, there you go, that's the word.
Yeah.
But then also if
Right.
I were to try to think deeper about it, I'm like, okay, culture could be like a certain way a family was raised and you guys have a
Exactly.
Thanksgiving every year together. Like
Exactly,
you're very
exactly.
bonded family. Like if I try to dig into it, that's where I'll
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
But I think people's minds might go to ethnicity
The
or
racial part.
demographically
Yeah.
wise. Right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Brody, you said it so well. And this is actually something my students struggle a lot with because it's this word that we hear all the time, but we hear it in so many different contexts. It's hard to
Hmm.
kind of put it together. But you're
Which I
exactly
am
right.
glad you're talking about this. I think it's a really good thing that you're bringing up. I like it a lot.
Yeah. And especially when we use culture in future episodes, maybe they'll be like, oh my God, I learned what that was. But so
Right.
basically, it's exactly what Brody said. Part of it is our ethnicity. So when we look at your
Is our
cultural
what?
identity, so it's your nationality, your race, your particular religion, your language, your heritage, the traditions that you have in your family, your ancestry, thinking patterns. Now, this is a big one: our beliefs, values, and norms, and then the social structures that exist around us. So, for instance,
Hmm.
I live in US American culture, which has a lot of different cultures within it, right? What would you say is an American belief? Something that we think is true or not true?
Hamburgers.
That's more like a value, right? Something that we think is really important is hamburgers. Beliefs are
A
more like
value. So I would
true or
say
not.
a value that's really common in America is that when people come to the US, they come to the US for the freedom to achieve their dreams.
Yes. Right? This is interesting
I
because
like
now
it.
you're talking about a different somebody from a different
Am I
culture coming
combining
into a new
two?
culture. No, you're just getting real deep with it, which I love. But this is so
That's all I
complex.
do. I go
And so
deep.
if you're thinking about your own culture, for instance, we see time differently. So people in the United States, at least and this is where it gets really complex because it gets meta and meta and meta when you look at different cities and different states and different towns and
Hmm.
all those things. You can get a little bit more specific. But the idea is that, China is a very collectivist culture. That means that they value the group. They believe that the group is more important than one individual. Together you
Mm.
succeed, not individually. America is individualistic. We think you should make it on your own and that's how you do it. The American dream is only for you if you work hard enough to get it. No matter who gets in your way, get them out of there and you do you, right? This is what we hear all the
Hmm.
time. And so
Hmm.
those two beliefs and value systems between those two different cultures, when we get together, that makes it hard to kind of meet one another on the same level. And that's where we find ethnocentrism, which is just thinking that your culture is doing it the right way and somebody else's is not.
Yeah, to me that's just ego.
It
But
is. It's egotistical. And so another example is time. So a lot of Caribbean countries, they view time much differently, and some South American countries. They view time as not necessarily linear. So, it's this and then this and then this. They view it as more of a guideline. For instance, one of my old friends, she used to have parties and she was from El Salvador, and she would say, "We're having my son's party at 2 p.m." Now, I am a white American woman from a family that were born and raised in Maine. And so our view of time culturally is you get there at 2, maybe even 5 minutes before. I got there at 2, and every single time that party would not start until about 7 or 8, and then people would still be coming at midnight. And so our view of time is different. In some cultures, you'll say be at the meeting at 5, and then the person won't show up until 8:30. In America, you would lose that opportunity to meet somebody because when we mean 2, we mean 2.
But then you also have, like you said, there's cultures within cultures within cultures. So I feel like there's culture, which is this big word.
Yep.
It's essentially
Overarching
the main part of the tree.
Yeah.
But then if you were to go underground or up the tree, then culture then subdivides into multiple branches and limbs.
Exactly. And so this goes with time. This goes with the food that we like. It goes with the activities that we have, the holidays that we experience. There's so many different things. And I love that you said subculture, because subcultures are actually a different thing. Subcultures are groups that come together. I know it's so crazy. I'm not going to go too much on this, but subcultures are basically
I love it, though.
Underground ones that are developed by the people that are also kind of core to our identity, but we usually make them ourselves. So for instance, Trekkies, people who love Star Trek so much that they've created a whole world, and they have like conventions,
right? And that's the culture.
Characters, and that's like their subculture. There's also subcultures of skateboarding and subcultures of I would say cults, but that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, but there's probably subcultures of like
sports.
Sex.
A lot of sports are subcultures.
Sports, food.
Ravers. I know that that's not the proper
Ravers,
term.
right? What EDMers? I don't know what they're called.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Oh, Kaizen had a great way. Kaizen, we miss you. We love you.
I know. Anyway, so there's so much when we look at culture, but it's really just the way that you were brought up. What were you taught about the world around you? Whatever that is your culture. So if you were taught to pee in a hole in the ground versus in a toilet, those are two different cultures. If you were taught to eat live, raw, moving fish on your plate versus desiccated ground beef, and then like, I'm talking about meatloaf. I don't know how to describe it, but basically
just say the word meatloaf. Everyone knows what meatloaf is.
Live octopus or meatloaf, that is your culture. If you've been taught to not make eye contact because it's disrespectful, that's your culture versus another culture who might value that eye contact shows respect. So it's our verbal communication, our nonverbal, it's what we believe, it's our values, it's the things that we think are normal, right? Brody, what is something in the United States that we think is just the most normal thing in the world that another culture would be like, what the fuck?
OnlyFans?
Okay, see, I still don't really understand what that is, but I kind of get it now. So yeah, that might be one of them. Yeah.
I don't know, honestly. What?
Yeah, no, I think that that's good. So something that has become the norm, especially in sports, mainly in sports, is
slapping
men
someone's
hitting
ass.
each other in the butt. Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Right? Other cultures, that's really weird. But
guys,
Turkey,
sack tapping.
Yeah. See, that's normal here. Other places would be like, that is a complete invasion of privacy. And not only that, it means that you're gay, right? But there are other cultures, I think it's Turkey, where men hold hands. That's normal there, right? And doesn't necessarily mean they're in a romantic relationship. In fact, in that culture, it's not acceptable. But anyway, so I hope that kind of breaks down what culture is, but that is a huge part of our identity. And so there might be listeners right now kind of saying, okay, well, now I'm realizing that it's much more complex because I'm part of a few, right? If your parents were from El Salvador and you grew up in America, you might have arguments with them often about what you think is proper versus not. I mean, a lot of my students say my brother gets to go out all night because he's favored in the family as, the big, strong man, and he's allowed to do whatever job he wants. I'm supposed to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom, and that's not what I want. You know, I'm supposed to spend more time with my family and live with my family when I get older and get married and have kids, but I don't want to do that. And so you might be torn between two cultures, and that might be
You know what's
really.
so interesting about that? Holly and I talked about that today a little bit.
Oh,
I was talking to Darren the other night, and it's so interesting because his wife's parents live with them. His
yeah.
brother and his wife, who is Chinese, moved to his parents' house. And so, which her parents live with him and her at their house with their two kids.
Oh my God, I'm so confused.
Right? I know. Darren's parents, his brother, his brother's wife,
Live
and
with
his
his
brother's
parents.
wife's parents and their two kids
Whoa.
all live together.
Whoa. Yes. See, that is a
And
that.
so, but that is a very normal thing in both
Yep.
the Asian culture and the Indian culture.
So yes, that's true. Very tight family relationships. They're both collectivist cultures.
But that's something that's so interesting. I have found that so interesting in the last 2 years
Yeah.
because that's something I wish, and families do this in the US. They really do, but it's not
Yeah, especially
collectively
in the southern
common.
states. Southern states
Correct.
have a much different view of family than some of the
So we have this amazing, the sweetest lady. I went to get a side of chicken at work the other day, and she's like, "Oh, honey, you just want a side of chicken?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, honey, come here. Why don't
She's
you
from
get a
the
whole
South?
chicken? It's only 80 cents more." And yeah, she's got a southern accent too. I'm like, "What?" She's like, "I do this for all my men."
Oh
But
my God.
she is what I think when people think of the southern hospitality is the word I'm looking for.
Oh, I see.
And
Which
I
we
asked,
not
"Where are
have
you
in the
from?"
United States.
Because my mom lives in Florida.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just when I lived there for a little bit,
Yeah.
it was that southern hospitality, and it was like everyone was like
Breath of
your
fresh air.
mother. And that's exactly what
Yeah.
she acted like when I was talking. She was like, "I do this for all my men and my boys." And I'm like, "You are the sweetest lady." She treats everyone as her kid.
Right.
And that's what she goes, "I live to take care of
Yeah.
everybody." And I was like, "You are the most amazing person in the world."
That's
And
so
that's one
nice.
thing I really liked about the South. I know I went on a tangent. I wish we had that more in the US culture,
Yeah.
or like the West Coast side of things, maybe, because my
Yeah.
family's not like that at all. And you know that. You have much
Yeah.
more family than I do.
Mhm.
And we are not that tight knit thing. And that's one thing Holly and I want to do when we have kids is we want to be able to move my mom back to the West Coast
Oh, that'd be
and
amazing.
have our kids and all this stuff. We want to be able to create that culture
Community.
of having like
Yeah.
or a community of having a family, that tight knit family.
Yeah, I love that. I totally was raised that way too. We were also Irish Catholic, which was a very tight knit,
Our Irish,
gigantic
like
crew.
big families, they are, right?
Yeah, that's the stereotype at
Big
least.
drinking families.
That's, you know what's interesting? That is a total stereotype. So you know who drinks more? England.
I mean, I could see that.
Moving
Because all my
on.
friends from England or that live there right now are really good drinkers.
Oh my God. Well, Rebecca, her family is British, and she's always like, "We could drink you under the table." I'm like, I know that. Okay. So the next part of the self concept, we just went over culture is a big part of how we see ourselves. The other one is personal. And this is just what we've developed through our social interaction with the people around us. So we learn as we grow up our emotional states, right? Like how well we deal with emotion, how well we experience it and show it to others, our talents, you know, what we're good at, our likes, our dislikes, the things that we value, the things that we love, believe, the roles that we take on. So like there's many different roles. I'm a teacher, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, but I'm also a leader. In group projects, I learned very quickly that I was always going to be the leader of the group because I had a lot to say. And then the important thing here is that our self concept does not exist at birth. Like it is a product of the social interaction we have growing up. And
So
this is where,
so self-concept you're saying is what you develop from being around other people as you grow older, from like your inner circle.
I mean, it's when you reflect deeply on yourself, and by
Mhm.
interacting with other people throughout your life, you learn what you like and don't like. I mean, this is just like in relationships. You had a bad sexual experience and you go, "Nope, don't like that." So the next time somebody tries it, you can say, "No, no, thank you. Don't like the choking.
I'm good. Hard pass.
Can we move on to something better?" That was a weird example, but you know what I mean? Like that is one huge thing is learning what you like and you don't like, and then being able to ask for those things. So that's our self-concept on a personal
Interesting.
level. So self-concept in this way, how you see yourself, is directly related to your social identity, which is reflected appraisal. So it's the mirroring of the judgments of those around you.
That was that perspective upon a
That
perspective
was
thing.
your mind blown moment on your run the other day when he was like,
Reflected appraisal.
you see yourself the way that other people see you. And I'm like, yes, yes, this is part of our social identity. Yes, it's personal, but it's part of our social identity in that we believe, or sometimes choose not to believe, the way that people judge us. So, for instance, if you were brought up your whole life, somebody telling you you're an amazing artist, you're an amazing artist. Oh my God, everything you do is just so amazing. And then you go to art school, and in art school, suddenly all your teachers are like, this is garbage. And you keep getting D's and F's. And you're like, hold on now. Has what people have been telling me about myself actually been who I am? And so sometimes they're correct. And upon self-reflection, we realize, oh, okay, I actually am a good artist.
Do we have a problem in do you think in society where we lie essentially too much to our children and tell them that they're amazing artists, even though we know they're not, even as I get it as a kid, but as you get older, oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Versus, hey, this is great, but you could improve. And then we're setting them up for the real world to not be able to handle constructive criticism.
Right. I mean, this is a whole episode on its own. And the little that I know about it is that it's definitely generational, right? So our parents were taught.
Is it really?
Very different. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So so you hear a lot of people speak on generational things. Is there really a difference between like generation Y or Z or millennials 100%. And baby boomers? There is.
And it's not like a distinct line.
I mean,
right?
I know there is, but like, that is a very well-known thing. Like,
right.
Baby boomers were known to, I mean, they worked their ass off for everything, whereas millennials were having everything at the touch of your fingertips.
I mean, in our lifetime, Brody, as millennials, we've witnessed 9/11. We have witnessed the Great Recession. And then we witnessed 4 years of a president that was, what is it called when they remove him from his damn throne? I'm blanking on the name.
You talking about hi.
Help me.
No, just kidding.
Help me.
You're talking about sorry guys. It's huge brain farts now. Like I'm gonna chime in.
He was traumatized, triggered. He was fired. He was oh my God, you guys, what the fuck? What is the
Are we really brain farting this hard?
Oh my God. Impeached, motherfucker.
There we go.
God damn it. Impeached. You know, a president who's been impeached twice. We've seen, you know, a wall try to get built. We've seen kids in cages. I mean, like, there's a lot. We've seen our global warming get so.
We've seen a war that's
worse.
Lasted over, you know, that's lasted almost has lasted two decades.
Absolutely. And so at whatever's happening from a young age up until you're an adult in the world around you, that does affect how you see the world, what you value, what you think is right and wrong, your morals too, but also how you see yourself. Our parents were part of a generation that were, my mom calls them latchkey kids, where they were just, their parents both worked, they were just given keys and they could come and go as they please. And their parents really didn't know what they were up to. And they got into some.
That's how my childhood started, honestly.
See, that doesn't mean that, you know, because our parents were in this generation that as soon as they give birth, it changes. This can continue and it depends on your own life situation. But we do see trends, and if we're looking at generalities, the parents right before us, and I don't know what generation that really is, kind of in between our age and our parents' age, were helicopter parents, where they wanted to just praise, and just give them so much love. And you can never give a kid too much love, but you can kind of give them a false sense of reality by giving them too much praise. And so now what they're doing right now, as we speak, at least in many private schools, are trying to change how we respond to our students and our kids. So instead of saying, oh my God, you did such a good job, honey, which is fine sometimes. But if they finish a puzzle, you could say, wow, you finished that puzzle. How does that feel? You know, and giving them the sense of how do you feel about it rather than how I feel about it.
Right. Do people really feel about it that way though? If they respond, wow, you did such a great job. You did that so fast.
Yeah.
I feel like the parents or friends or teachers' reaction is not necessarily a true reaction. It is a lifted reaction, a manufactured reaction in a sense. because that's how we were taught to speak to children.
Exactly.
I think that's a good thing that we're teaching children
Yeah.
to, instead of forcing a emotion onto them, we're teaching them to create their own.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just giving them the agency, so the choice to learn about themselves without the overwhelming abundance of this is who we think you are. I am trying to be a parent in terms of we're learning new things and the science is showing us that this is a better way to do it. So it's not like I'm being unnatural, but I'm learning how to speak differently to my kid than I was spoken to. Not because I thought I had a great upbringing, but
Sure.
it does change the way that kids see themselves. And they've shown that these kids actually have more self-confidence when they are taught how to regulate and learn their own emotions and making choices on their own, rather than being told just no because I said so. No, we're not going to do that right now just because XYZ, and actually giving them a reason. And so another thing that I would say is that when somebody says, oh, Oliver is going to be a lady killer, and I'll say, or a man killer, that sounds bad, but like, I'll try and change the terminology just because we don't know. And you should be able to, like Kaizen said in the last episode, it's weird that we don't get to choose our names or change them if we don't feel like we fit them, right? Because that's part of our self-identity. So reflected appraisal is a really just tough one because we often take in both good and bad messages that other people tell us that we are, right? I mean, the media has a huge impact on our self-identity because the media likes to tell us who we are, right? As a woman,
Right.
I have such bad body image, not just because of media, but because of all the people around media that also reify it. Although I'm seeing those things change now as an adult, where women are like, let that flab fly, girl. Say that 10 times fast.
Flap,
Let that flab
flap,
fly.
flap.
You just be you, and
Sure.
your body is beautiful. And it's only after seeing these messages for like the last 5 years now that I've started to even get to a place where I'm like, oh, I'm eating healthy. I'm working out. I don't have this picture perfect body, but this body has done incredible fucking things. I've given birth to 2
See,
live children. And
I
also,
like how you
it just
take
does
that.
things for me.
And that is why you are so great at what you do, because how you describe that, and I think what a lot of people lose is let that flab fly, right? You
Yeah.
hear that. You're teaching yourself to feel
Right.
empowered by the body that you're in.
Yeah.
But
And it's just
what
rewriting the
people I
narrative
think
in your
also
head.
hear is that they just right, and they leave that let the that's such a tongue twister.
Let
Why
the
couldn't you say
flab
something so much
fly.
easier?
This is not even a real thing. I just made
Let
this
the
up and
flab
now we have to
I
make
know, but we'll leave it just because it's easy. But when people say let the flab fly, it's like, oh, so you're just saying it's okay to be overweight. What I'm saying is empower yourself, be comfortable in the skin that you're
right.
in, but progress towards your own
Right.
happiness.
But also, I will
You
say,
know,
who the fuck cares? If somebody wants to be overweight and they don't care and they just want to
you
eat
don't get to
until they
judge
die,
them.
they
Mhm.
get to do whatever the fuck they want with the life that they were given. I know
Yeah.
that we are taught as humans to judge, and it comes from a very primal place. Judgment
Mhm.
comes from two places. So, the original place it comes from is when we were cave people and we were out in the wilderness and a threat was in front of us, and we had to judge visually what we were looking at.
Safe or bad.
Yeah, safe or bad
Mhm.
in order to run or to fight. We had to be
That's where
aware of our
your sympathetic and parasympathetic response system come
exactly.
into.
Yes, Brody, we're combining our areas
Career
right
fields.
now. And so we also categorize as humans because we have so much information. We have to categorize it in certain parts of our brain, in certain related areas, so that we can recall this information that we've collected. And so while that works well in some ways, it also falls short. And so we tend to then
Mhm.
judge other people so easily based on what is socially acceptable, because in our culture, it is socially acceptable to make fun of people because of their weight. I mean,
Mhm.
that's changing too, but it's also socially acceptable to catcall women. Again, I could keep going, but you see where I'm going with this. And
Mhm.
so, one of the interesting things that I want the listeners to really understand how media plays a role in your self identity,
I
because
like this.
we learn so much about the world through the media we take in. And there was a study done, this is called cultivation theory. And it's the idea that the more media you watch, specifically, they were talking about television, which included the news,
Okay.
TV shows, and commercials.
Okay.
The more you intake, the less realistic view you have of the world around you. And I really want you to hear that. The more you take in media, the less realistic reality is to you. They coined a term, mean world syndrome. So the more people watched the news, the more they thought the world was dangerous. But they thought it was much more dangerous than statistics actually show. It's the same thing with relationships. There was a study done where they got teens to watch romantic comedies or TV shows, and their view of what relationships were supposed to be were far different than what actual research tells us healthy relationships are. Because in romantic TV shows or movies, you hate each other and then you love each other and you have this huge blow up, and it has to be like this. In every romantic comedy, there's some sort of manipulation, and then somebody forgives
Everything's
somebody.
over exaggerated.
Like, everything is over exaggerated. Like to have a good relationship, you have to hate each other. Like The Notebook, they fought, and that was somehow endearing to see, oh, they fight because they love each other. And that's just not. Yes, couples argue, but they don't fight. They don't hit each other, which they actually do in that movie. Anyway, I can't go down this road because I'll be here for 4 years.
The rabbit hole.
Yeah. I do have to take a quick break. I have to go check on Milo. He's crying, but I will be right back. I promise.
All right. Intermission, guys.
Okay, intermission. Thank you all for listening to part 1. Catch us in just a day or two with part 2. Thank you. Have a good day.